Good morning. This is Jerry Gulke, top producer, marketing strategist, columnist with some pre-report comments on the June 30th USDA acres and stocks report tomorrow. If you haven't seen the estimates by various firms out there, it's interesting to note the wide range of variations between what the extremes are as far as acres planted in soybeans, corn, and possibly in some cases wheat, but especially spring wheat. But in corn, there's a variation of about 3.5 million acres in corn, fairly tight, with an average guess of about 84 million acres versus last year's 86, or down about 2 million from last year, or about another million from the March 31st report that the USDA had. So about 1 million less acres in corn is the average guess. In beans, it ranges from 75.3 to 76.6, so 4 million acres, with an average of about 78.12, or up about 2 million from the March 31st report, and about a little higher than last year, although USDA had March 31st reports about unchanged from last year. Some interesting things to look at. We know that there was a significant drop in wheat acres intended, and that's in the soft red winter wheat and the hard red winter wheat areas, and maybe some in spring wheat that we saw on March 31st, about 5 million acres, in fact. So if you look at that, you have to say to keep beans unchanged on March 31st, some of those wheat acres that would have had double crop bean acres, maybe 2 million, were going to go to full season beans. So that just gave that lack of soft red winter wheat took away some bean acres, but then were added back by those who intended to say, I'm going to plant some of my non-wheat acres into full season beans, both maybe in the eastern corn belt, southern part, and also then in the hard red winter wheat areas, where you would suspect they would probably been wanting to intended to plant some corn, and perhaps some beans at the expense of wheat, because of the profitability of wheat wasn't there. So there's going to be some huge surprises tomorrow with the wide range of the situation, especially in soybeans. So you'd have to assume that just about everywhere that we looked, that the farmer is going to try to plant his intended acres, and only way he wouldn't do it in corn was if he was forced out of it. So when it got wet, you naturally tried to plant somewhere. So now you started to plant the dry acres in Iowa and Ohio, Illinois, Ohio, and other states, Indiana. And that might have otherwise been intended to plant the beans. And so it kept raining, and if you didn't have your fertilizer down, you put fertilizer on top, and then suddenly you may have come close to getting your corn in the ground, and now what do? I want to plant soybeans, and it's too wet. And, of course, it isn't too late to plant beans in some areas of the southern Illinois and so forth, in southern Indiana. And we have people suggesting that if bean prices hold here, they'll plant beans right on the 4th of July, which might have been there double-cropped anyway. So we'll have some single full-season planted acres of beans planted that will now yield no more than the double crop. So a lot of complications in there. I think it's going to take time to digest that market tomorrow. How do we go into it? I don't think as a farmer you can afford to risk your whole farm, on the fact that the corn might have got planted or might not have got planted. I think my fear or my concern is that in looking at all this, that we may be surprised that the bean acres didn't get planted. There's someone out there that's thinking we're going to plant 4 or 5 million acres, but we found 2.5 million acres of unplanted ground, and through all states. The biggest majority of this, of course, was in North Dakota at 1.5 million acres to 1.7. So there's still, 700,000 acres spread all over the United States, which isn't much compared to the total of what we plant that didn't get planted. And then, of course, the question is, what happened to those other 2 or 3 million acres, phantom acres, that government says due to the economic conditions didn't get planted? That's where some of the firms are saying they're all going to go to beans, and you're going to find out that we got a huge amount of beans out there. Two things. We can get by with our crop of corn being down only 1 million acres. We don't want more acres than than anything less than 1 million acres. Anything more than 1 million acres less is going to not be good news. We got a perfect crop coming. We got a good chance, if things don't change, that we would get an average to above average yield. And in fact, crop ratings last week suggested a record yield for this time of the year. That all changes, of course, with time, but the surprise might be in the soybeans in that it was a stretch to get these guys to plant full season beans where they used to plant wheat, and now you're asking them to plant another 3 million that the world needs. That could be the bullish surprise. So I like to have half my beans sold up here and a good majority of my corn, and certainly in the fact that what has happened in June is that it looked like early June we were starting out to get long-term monthly buy signals. Those of you that have read Top Producer for years understand when we get a long-term buy signal in corn and wheat and beans, it usually lasts 18 months. Well, corn's had a problem in the United States with getting it in the ground. Suddenly we had warmer weather. We got ideal planting conditions. That assumption in early June turned out to be, as of today, not tomorrow's report yet in it, to be a monthly key reversal down, which said it thwarted everything that we may have enough corn because of the livestock problems. It's going to get worse, and certainly if we come in here with way less corn, then the livestock guys are definitely going to have to liquidate. So in wheat, the same way. Wheat with soybeans, on the other hand, posted a solid monthly buy signal, and it suggests that the market believes that whatever is planted out there, without a 42 or 43 bushel yield, we may not have enough beans, and that beans are a world problem that can't be solved only by the United States. We need to give the incentive to South America to plant more next fall, whereas corn and wheat, plenty of wheat in the world, and corn, we may have solved the problem in the United States for another year. So with that, I don't like to have any much wheat left that isn't sold, and no more than 50% of my beans sold, and about two-thirds of the corn. We've lost a lot already in corn. The negative point is that technically it tells us we need a huge bullish report tomorrow to help everybody, and that would mean that we had big reductions in corn acres and big reductions in bean acres, or certainly not very much up on the upside, and a huge reduction in wheat. Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have all three. One of those three is going to be hurting. The fear by some out there is that we went out and planted a lot more acres than we thought, and I don't subscribe to that because of the weather situation that we had, especially in the northern plains. So with that, we'll see what happens tomorrow morning, and good marketing, but certainly go into this thing coverage. There's an old adage that says, and of course these guys didn't farm probably, but it says that going into report, a farmer ought to be hedged and a speculator ought to be out. So if we're wrong in any one of these, we're going to lose money on one of the crops by not having it sold. And I don't think you can have our cake and eat it too, so to speak, to have everyone's corn, soybeans, and wheat go higher from here. That's going to take a weather problem, but these are pretty good high-priced beans, and let's have some sold, and let's hope we're wrong. That's it, and we'll see what happens tomorrow morning. We'll be a lot smarter then. Thank you, and have a good day.